Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We're broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world, bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and folks, we are on TikTok. Well, there is going to be a by-election. I mean, in Britain, we fight through the democratic process. There's going to be a by-election coming up in Rutherglen sometime in October, in the first half of October. And so one or two good candidates that we know standing at that, our man Niall Fraser was announced as a candidate for the Scottish Family Party. He was announced last night, actually, as the candidate, so he'll be standing as well for that. But there's no date set yet. Westminster will set the date, and presently Westminster is on holiday. But they'll reconvene sometime in September and then set the date for that. Any ideas how we should fight as well, if not within the democratic process? Other ways of fighting is exactly what we're doing, which is essentially just campaigning on the streets. And we were out on the streets on Saturday here in Glasgow, in Argyle Street, and we'll put up one or two photographs of that right now. Thank you very much to the AFFG table team who came out with us and who made it a very good and productive day meeting the British public. And that's two of us. That's me there closest to the camera with our colleague in the background wearing a British and proud AFFG t-shirt, talking to a member of the public who was wanting one of our wee badges that we're very pleased to give her. That's a really good photograph, actually. I like that photograph. Okay. And there's an artistic photograph taken from behind one of the flower pots which the council have decorated Argyle Street with, which are very attractive, I have to say. A member of the public there talking to our man behind the desk. Okay. And indeed signing our petition, as many people do, which is a petition against another referendum. Okay. Another chap there signing our petition. Wonderful stuff. And Argyle Street was quite busy, I have to say. It was actually a very nice day. Notice all the stuff that we've got there. We don't sell anything, but we do give away a lot of stuff for a small donation. And that includes our magazines, our wee books, Scotland Now, which we've got a big load of, and other flags and cards. Okay, yeah, there we go. That's two items of AFFG apparel. That's the t-shirt that I wear, and that's the t-shirt that I've got on at the moment. There you go, a force for good. And you'll find a link for those t-shirts in the comment threads. There you go. That's a good one. That's a nice colour as well. Nice blue colour. It says British and proud, with our Union Jack heart in the middle. Okay. A close up there as well. Okay, very nice. So yeah, those were what we did at the weekend. And while we were busy meeting the great British public, the Scottish nationalists under the All Under One banner, AUOB moniker, were in Skye having a separatist shuffle in Skye, in the Isle of Skye, okay, and we videoed them and we counted 196 of them, which, to be frank, is quite a lot of people to get in Skye. I didn't know there were that many people in Skye, to be frank with you. But there was 196, not the 500 that they lied about. So as usual, they doubled their numbers and added some on in order to get a nice round figure. But it wasn't even 200 at the end of the day. Having said that, fair play. If you're going to have a march in Skye of all places, you know, that's a lot of organisation for very little reward, quite frankly. But if they want to waste their time doing that, fine. Who are we to stop them? Now, talking about marches, a very interesting development as far as the marching wings of the Fruitcake Nationalists are concerned. The Scottish National Party officially has always been a little bit reluctant to join with the all under one banner people because, you know, some of them are a little bit sketchy. And so you've had one or two outlying MSPs or MPs who go along and address them. But the main body of the SNP, the cabinet members, they don't really want to get too involved. So the SNP has always wanted its own marching wing rather than the all under one banner people. So what they've done is they've joined up with one of the campaigning groups that work closely with them, and they've also joined up with the National newspaper, and they've formed a new marching group basically that's now going to be called Believe in Scotland. So now you've got basically a split among the Scottish nationalist marchers. You've got the all under one banner people, and you've got the officially approved Believe in Scotland people. And the Believe in Scotland people are going to be having a march this Saturday in Edinburgh. And it starts at the top of the Royal Mile, and very originally and with great foresight, it walks to the bottom of the Royal Mile. And so it's not too complicated for those who are bad with maps. If you can find your way to the top of the Royal Mile, then all you need to do is walk in a straight line for a mile until you get to the bottom of the Royal Mile. And so that's this Saturday at 1:30, and we will be filming them as always because it's going to be important to get a number for this one, because this is going to be like the officially approved SNP marching group. And so are they going to lie about the numbers to the extent that the Scottish nationalist people, the all under one banner people, lie about their numbers? Now, already the National newspaper is saying that there's going to be 15,000 of them. I would be astonished if there was 10% of that. A tenth of that. Okay, I would expect possibly around 1,500 at the most. But we'll see. But we're going to get a count on it, because this is the number that Humza Yousaf will actually be quoting. And so if we can show him to be a liar with video evidence, then that will be very, very important. So we're going to be doing that on Saturday, this Saturday. We do need help, though. We need help to get there. We need help with various costs and so on. So if you want to drop a donation to us in order to ensure that we can do that, please do so and go ahead. But it's important to get this one really nailed down, because this is the one that Humza Yousaf is going to be quoting. This is the number that he's going to be quoting, and we can't allow him to lie in the way that the all under one banner people have been getting away with their lies. Anyway, we're always on the ball with these things, so stay tuned, folks. Stay tuned. Good. Hello to Alan, says, good evening, hope you're having a good night. He's working at the moment, he's going to catch up later. Christopher says, it's not Believe in Scotland, it's Make Believe in Scotland. Exactly, and their national anthem is The Land of Make Believe by Bucks Fizz In fact, that should be playing as they stumble and shuffle and waddle down the Royal Mile. Of course, they will lie, says Jill, and that's the unfortunate thing that we're going to be facing as well. Busting Indy Myths Part 27. Great. We're going to be looking at the oft-heard myth. Can Scotland be independent in the EU? Okay, Busting Indy Myths Part 27. Scotland can't be independent in the EU because it is a contradiction in terms. And this is a particularly important point to make because the march at the weekend organised by Humza, Yousaf and the National newspaper is for independence for Scotland in the EU. Okay, that's how they are actually describing it. Independence for Scotland in the EU. That's the name of their march. And this person here writing in the National yesterday she goes, this event, organised in partnership with Believe in Scotland, aims to unite the Yes movement for Scotland's independence and its re-entry into the European Union. Well, how can you have an independent Scotland in the European Union? An independent Scotland's sovereignty is going to be highly constrained within the European Union. It's going to be constrained economically and democratically and politically as far as policies are concerned. For example, economically, it is going to be required to join the euro. Okay, so it will mean that Scotland won't have its own independent currency. I mean, forget even about keeping the pound. If you did set up a Scottish national bank to promote a particular Scottish currency, okay, that would be understandable from a particular point of view. But they don't even want to do that. They actually want to give up their opportunity to do that and to join the euro. And in fact, you have to. You have to give up your independent currency if you want to get into the EU. So giving up your currency is an automatic requirement to join the European Union. So how on earth is that independence? Secondly, in order to join the euro, you have to do what's called, you have to keep your fiscal deficit, as it's called, at a low percentage, at 3%. Now, what's the fiscal deficit? The fiscal deficit is the difference between a government's spending and its revenue, the amount of money that it gets in. And that difference is expressed as a percentage of the overall gross domestic product of the country, because that provides a way of measuring the deficit in relation to the otherwise size of the economy. And in 22-23 tax year, Scotland's fiscal deficit was 9% of gross domestic product, which was pretty high, and that compared to the UK's overall deficit of 5.2, so it was almost double what the overall UK fiscal deficit is. And to join the euro, you need to get that down to 3% of GDP, and the only way you do that is by putting taxes through the roof and putting government expenditure through the floor. Okay, so you would have austerity max. Everybody would be getting taxed to the limit at the same time as government spending was going through the floor. That's the only way you could get that deficit right down. That's the only way you could get it down to 3%. So that would be extremely harmful as well if you wanted to join the EU. You won't be hearing those sorts of things from the speakers, though. at the march this weekend. They'll be pretending it's nothing to do with that. They'll be overlooking all of that, all of these terrible economic consequences. Furthermore, democratically, if we joined, Scotland would only have around about 14 seats in the European Parliament out of over 700 members of the European Parliament, which would be about 2% of the seats. So how is that any kind of democratic say, really, in what way the European Union is going to move? And that's before you even start asking whether or not it's right that all your laws should have to be made abroad. Why would you want to gain what you call independence from Westminster only to sign up to a very harsh regime in Brussels? So it doesn't make any sense, and it's a contradiction in terms. And there's many people, actually many Scottish nationalists, who don't even want that, and who won't be going along to the march on Saturday because they don't agree with that policy that the SNP and the Greens have, which doesn't make really any sort of sense, other than as some kind of reason because they don't like England, basically. So it's like anybody but we'll ally with anybody, regardless of how economically or democratically harmful it might be, just because we don't like Westminster and we don't like being part of the United Kingdom. I mean, that's really the only explanation you can really come to at the end of the day on those kind of matters. So independence in the European Union is it's a contradiction in terms, and it would be an economic disaster for Scotland, it would be a democratic disaster for Scotland, and it would be a policy disaster as well, because we would be facing the diktats of whatever the European Union thought was best for us. The fact is, we can't be independent Scotland as a member of the EU. We don't believe it was ever a good idea for the United Kingdom to have been a member of the EU. Scotland doesn't want to go back into all of that again. In fact, we'll get far more benefits in the long term by staying part of the United Kingdom and working for good leadership here in Scotland as part of the United Kingdom in the world, taking advantage of trading with the entire world and not simply the countries in the European Union bloc. Okay, so here ends Busting Indie Myths. We have got our guest coming up at the bottom of the hour in 5 minutes. Prior to that, we are going to have our competition, which is for our Union Jack playing cards. And we're also going to throw in a bag of Royal Air Force Typhoon Display Team coffee, which is very relevant today, because today, 30th of April in 1952, was the first ever flight of the Vulcan bomber, and we're going to have a fly past which is due any moment over in fact through our office of a Vulcan bomber. And here it comes now, here it comes. Check this out. Fly past of the Vulcan bomber. Blink and you would miss it. But that was the Vulcan XH-558, which was the last flying Vulcan bomber in the United Kingdom. There was 134 made by Avro engineers in Manchester, and it was a nuclear bomber as well, so you wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of it, or it would drop nuclear bombs on you as well as conventional bombs for good measure. And a very powerful symbol, actually, and you used to see them flying around. I remember in the 80s I would see them quite regularly flying over the south of Scotland where I lived at the time. Very impressive, and they flew fairly low as well. Anyway, like all of these things, they are unfortunately no more. That particular Vulcan had its last flight in 2015, but it had its first flight. And let's put up a picture of the Vulcans. Where are the pictures of the Vulcans? Let's get them up. There you go. That's the first one. That was the one that flew on this day in 1952, and they had slight modifications, and this was the last one here. That's no longer with us, although they have one that still can taxi down a runway, but that's about the size of it. Fantastic aircraft. Good. Folks, please welcome David from UK Column. Good evening, David.
Hello, it's lovely to be with you.
Good. Thank you very much for dropping in tonight, and thanks for all the work that you do at UK Column. I was watching UK Column today, and you guys have got a great organisation, a very smooth media organisation, basically, that you've got fantastic platforms, and you do a tremendous job. Now, I thought it'd be good to have you on this show because I know you were at the Edinburgh Fringe, which is finished now. It ran through all of August, and there's always one or two wee controversies erupt at the Edinburgh Fringe, but one of them this year was involving some comedy talent that had grouped together, led by an Irish screenwriter and comedian called Graham Linehan. And they had booked the venue to have their show, but it was cancelled, and it was cancelled because Graham Linehan is quite outspoken against much of the kind of gender trans thing that's going on at the moment, particularly opposing the medical interventions on children and the issues regarding women's rights and so on. And whatever one may think of that, what was particularly interesting was the fact that he couldn't actually get even a venue. Do you want to take up the story from the beginning on that and tell us your thoughts on that matter?
Yes. So I got a ticket because I was quite keen to see some of these performers. One of them was Dominic Frisby, who we've featured some of his work on the UK Column before, because some of the songs he does humorous songs, and some of those are quite on point. So I thought, well, this is a chance to actually meet him. You know, we've talked about him on the call. It's a chance to meet him, say hello. So I got myself a ticket, and then I got an email to say, "Oh, very sorry that the venue has cancelled it." And there was a very intemperate announcement from the venue, which was the Arches in Leith. Very grumpy, very condescending. You know, these and it used the word cancelled. It was quite clear that it was cancelled culture. They used the word, and so they said, "Well, look, we'll get another venue if we possibly can, and we'll email you at 3:30. We'll not announce where the venue is. We'll just email the ticket holders at 3:30 and tell them where the secret venue is." Now, this is something that is actually coming in more and more. If you want to see something that's controversial, so if it's regarding gender, if it's regarding race, these sort of areas, the areas that have been made a cultural war by the Marxist left pushing. So if you want to see anything that's critical of the left-wing establishment's views, you're very likely to be cancelled. And this idea of having a secret venue, sometimes actually telling people where they're going to meet, and then meeting outside and then marching them to the venue so that people can't find out where the venue is at all until the show actually starts. These are the sort of nonsensical things that have to be done in order to actually have free speech in this country. So they got a second venue, and the second venue also cancelled when the pressure came on. Don't actually know where the second venue was, but they cancelled too. So they decided they would hold the comedy performance in the open air outside Holyrood. Holyrood's a good place for comedy. It's quite appropriate. So we had the joy of seeing Dominic Frisby singing his song "Maybe," which has a verse about Nicola Sturgeon, right outside Holyrood. So that was quite glorious. And Graham Linehan, did his stand-up routine. Now, he's not a stand-up comedian. I think this was the sixth time he'd ever done stand-up. Now, I talk a lot publicly. The idea of doing stand-up, dear, I mean, that has to be one of the hardest things to do. And it's not what he does for a living, but his living, which is writing comedy, he's not able to carry that on because he's been totally cancelled because of his views on the transgender issue. Views which 10 years ago would have been shared by 100% of the population, basically. So he can't carry on his business. He can't carry on his essentially his first love in terms of his career. So he's doing a bit of stand up and telling a few jokes. He says to keep his hand in, and they wouldn't even let him do that. Now, about 150 people turned up. It was a very warm crowd. They were very glad to see all the people performing, and we all went round the pub afterwards and had a good chat. So it was a nice night, but it's very sad that it came to that in Edinburgh, city of enlightenment and all that. You can't actually get a venue, tell a few jokes, without somebody cancelling you, not for even what you're going to say. It's what you're deemed to have said or you're deemed to believe. It's thoughts. That was his kind. He believed the wrong thing.
Yes, that's remarkable as well, considering how many venues there are in Edinburgh during the Fringe. There's literally thousands of performers and hundreds of shows, and consequently hundreds of venues as well. But not to be able to find one is really quite telling and unfortunate. And I often think it would be great if we had some sort of, our side had some kind of benefactor who had, a large pub or a building that's got a stage in it or a hall or something like that, who is always on call to be able to host potentially controversial acts or meetings or things like that. And there are such people who do own buildings in the centre of Edinburgh and so on, that it would be good if some of them stepped up and said, you can use my ballroom or you can use this or that or whatever, and weren't so worried about attacks. Because at the end of the day, all this ducking and diving and so on is ridiculous, and nobody should really be afraid of standing up and giving their point of view on those things. So it's a sorry state of affairs. Do you think it's becoming worse in Scotland, or do you think that's maybe always been a bit like this? I mean, certainly in the past, and I'm talking about going way back in the past, it was very dangerous if you had the wrong opinion on things. You could find yourself at the wrong end of a gallows. So maybe we've moved on in that sense, but we still haven't reached perfection.
We're a long way from perfection. I think it's getting worse presently. I'll give you a couple of examples. The Scottish Union for Education, which is doing excellent work pushing against the indoctrination of children. So they don't want the sex education that amounts to grooming. They don't want the queer theory being rolled out in schools. They don't want the critical race theory indoctrinating the children that everything that they are, the very colour of their skin is somehow toxic, and that everything that Britain is or did is all reprehensible. They're pushing back against that, and they're wanting actual education, want education, not indoctrination. So they got deplatformed several times, right? So they're getting deplatformed. They ended up in one point in a church. A church hall took them in and said, so this is the Tron Church in Glasgow, took them in for one event where they'd been deplatformed by, I think it was either a council run or a co-op run organisation in Glasgow. But it's not every sort of event that a church would consider appropriate. And this is quite a brave church, because the churches aren't doing much in the way of bravery at the moment, unfortunately. There are a few exceptions. And so that's one example. I've been deplatformed a few times. And I learned one thing, that if you hire a hall from a member of the Muslim faith, they don't deplatform you. They don't bow to pressure. They actually, if you make a deal, they'll honour the deal. That's an interesting data point. And one of the big events that Mike Robinson was at down in England a couple of years ago, that got cancelled, and they ended up in an Islamic hall as well. So the Islamic community seems more immune to the pressure. And the interesting thing about the pressure is a consistent thing. When this happens and you're deplatformed, and I've been deplatformed a few times and had a bit of trouble over the years. When you're deplatformed, they never tell you why. Right? They never come and say, look, someone's phoned up and they've said this about you. Right? You're an anti-Semite Holocaust denier, you're a homophobic bigot, you're whatever, right? They never say, this is the accusation, is it true? Would you like to answer it? There's never a point where you're given the opportunity to defend yourself, ever. They're just cancelled. And I don't actually get this. Why? You've hired a hall to somebody, someone else who you've no dealings with, you don't know them, phones up and says, this person that you've hired a hall to, he's very bad, and you must deplatform him, you must cancel his booking. Why do they do it? Why do they say, look, who are you? Why are you telling me what to do? Have you got any evidence? Would you like to put the evidence in writing that this person is going to be doing something which is unlawful? No, they don't do anything like that. They fold. And it's this kind of cravenness about it. Oh, someone might criticize me. Oh, I'm going to fold. Oh, it's so pathetic. And this is part of the thing that's wrong with our society. We should be less pathetic. Speak the truth, right? Speak what you believe, and then if someone comes back with a different viewpoint, listen, think about it, answer them. Don't go all, peril clutching and wounded.
Yes,
stand up and speak.
I think sometimes what it also depends upon as well is simply the kind of person that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with, for example, you spoke there about the mosques being perhaps more open. I mean, you're dealing with sort of middle-aged, older men, basically, who are quite strong-minded on various things. If you're dealing with some kind of wee pub in Edinburgh, it's probably going to be students, maybe, they haven't even finished university yet, maybe they're a wee bit timid about life, that kind of thing, and so they're going to be less serious, really, on those matters, and perhaps more inclined to flee or to be intimidated or something like that. If you're dealing with like a working men's pub in Bradford or something like that, they're not going to be intimidated by anybody. So it depends the culture of the actual establishment itself.
Yeah, it was interesting to note that the film about what it is to be a woman, right? Was it What is a Woman? Was that one it's called?
Something like that, another one.
There was a film that was cancelled twice in Edinburgh at the university, because we can't show things at the university because reasons. And the university security were very instrumental in getting it cancelled. Right? They were the merest hint of any argument, and they just basically closed the whole thing down. This happened twice. They moved it to a pub in working class Coatbridge, and none of the student protesters went there. They were absent. Now, whether they just couldn't be bothered going to Coatbridge, whether they didn't know where Coatbridge was, or whether the idea of trying to go to a working class pub and cause trouble didn't seem quite as attractive as their university, which is very woke and is already kind of basically on their side. I don't know. But yeah, I think you've got a point.
Yes, I think a lot of that has to do with the actual the culture and the place that it's happening as well, and that's big cities as well are different from rural areas. In big cities, you get those fashionable types. In rural areas, traditionally, it's been less fashionable politically and in other ways.
Well, on the subject of speech being cancelled, in fact, speech being dangerous, Police Scotland have gone into swift action today, and you might be thinking, is it to address some of the blatant corruption inside the Scottish government? No. How about corruption inside local authorities? No, it's not that. How about corruption inside Police Scotland? No, it's not that either. No, it's the man in the street who called Patrick Harvie a deviant. He's been arrested.
Oh my!
All right, now he's been arrested on. I still don't know what charge yet. The police have said he's been arrested and charged over homophobic comments. So the police have concluded that calling Patrick Harvie a deviant relates to his homosexuality. That's a decision that the police have made. Now,
yes. Mm-hmm.
The point I was making on the column on Monday was Patrick Harvie himself identifies as queer. He uses the word queer to represent what he terms as us, our people. Right? So the group he's coming from use the term queer to identify themselves. Queer is a synonym of deviant. So presumably, if the man had said, "You're queer, Mr. Harvie," Mr. Harvie would have said, "Yes, I am, and I'm very proud to identify with that label," I guess.
Yes.
All right. So what he did is he chose the wrong synonym.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been arrested by Police Scotland. So Police Scotland are now policing synonyms. You choose the wrong one, you end up with a criminal record. Presumably, they haven't got their hate crime nonsense, I think, in place yet, but presumably they'll do something. It'll be before a single judge, and the judge will decide the context, and the judge will decide what the man meant, and there won't be any justice, and there certainly won't be a jury, and he'll get some sort of conviction, which could have very significant effects on his life.
Well,
his
absolutely,
his employability.
Absolutely, any conviction, especially for these modern fashionable hate crimes, can always be spun very badly, unfortunately, against you for something that very, very, very recently wouldn't have even really raised an eyebrow. And as well, you mentioned that particular word, deviant. It doesn't necessarily refer even to sexuality. If you're referring to other deviant practices, many people would quite rightly say that if you think children should get medical interventions to try to change their bodies, that's a horrifically deviant policy that people like Patrick Harvie support. Deviant meaning just simply wrong in that regard.
And also the whole introduction of queer theory into schools. Right? If you dig into the origins of queer theory, the original paper on queer theory was written by an American academic called Gail Rubin, and that was openly promoting paedophilia. But half of it was to do with paedophilia. So that was ground zero of queer theory. The main proponents, the main gurus of queer theory, people like Michel Foucault, were extremely dangerous and predatory with small boys, and went to North Africa, amongst other places, to have sex with boys. So this is where queer theory came from, and if you look at what it's trying to do, it's trying to essentially dissolve the family system, dissolve the binary between men and women, and make everything fluid. So it's an assault on society. That is by definition deviant, right? Because it's not the norm. In fact, it's trying to destroy the norm. So there are many reasons, other than his personal sexuality, for suggesting to Mr. Harvie that his policies, his beliefs, could legitimately be called deviant. But Mr. Harvie didn't try and defend that position. He didn't say to the man, "Why are you calling me that?" He just called him a bigot, because that apparently wins the argument, and then reported it to the police so that they could go and intimidate an ordinary member of the public for being rude to a politician. Yes. Because that's the sort of politics we have these days. Yes. Politics where don't annoy the wrong people, because woe betide you if you do. And this is, of course, the system where people are afraid of the politicians, which is the system of fascism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we also in Scotland, we have to remember that just prior to the 2014 referendum, Alex Salmond centralised the police and essentially made it so that, although it's maybe not formally recognised, it's nevertheless kind of understood that the First Minister is essentially in charge of the police. It's a hierarchical structure with basically the Scottish Cabinet at the top of it. Whereas in past times, it was very much diffused throughout the various regions, or however it was organised in the past. But by the centralisation of it, which Salmond did deliberately, because he thought, well, what happens if we win this? I want to be making sure I've got the whip hand over the police, just because there could be all sorts of unexpected consequences as far as civil peace is concerned. So he centralised it all prior to the 2014 referendum as deliberate strategy to ensure that he and his mates were essentially in charge of the police. So Patrick Harvie is a cabinet member. He's part of the so-called Scottish government. And so the police themselves have to be aware of that and have to realise that basically Patrick Harvie is one of their bosses at the end of the day. How ridiculous does that sound? But that's actually true. I mean, he's part of the Scottish government that runs Police Scotland. So whatever he wants, he's going to get, or at least the police are going to be sucking up to him, to use an unfortunate turn of phrase.
Just to illustrate the point here, right? So if you talk to Scottish government, particularly Scottish government officials, they are terrified of the charge that they're influencing the police, right? And they will use the independence of the police as an excuse for inaction, where they really should be acting to actually try and highlight or address some injustice. They'll go, oh no, it's the police are independent, can't touch them. So they're almost to a fault keen to show how independent the police are. But the question is, are they really? We've got Shawnee Boy, the satirist, when he does these impersonations of Patrick Harvie. One of the things he has Patrick Harvie say is, "I own Police Scotland. You can't touch me. I own Police Scotland."
All right.
He said, it's interesting that a satirist should say that. And to give you a couple of very specific points, we have, of course, had the Chief Constable of Police Scotland, Mr. Ian Livingston, say how difficult the investigation into the £666,000 worth of missing money in the SNP has been because of his close relationship with Nicola Sturgeon, former First Minister. Well, that's an interesting data point. And an even more important one, and encourage people to go and look this up, the overseeing body, because when all the police forces were amalgamated into one that was clearly a too much power in one place problem. So we've got an overseeing body called the Scottish Police Authority. Now, this was formerly headed by Susan Deacon after a whole series of just disastrous heads of the SPA. It was just one horrendous mess after another. They got Susan Deacon, who tried to sort the mess out, and she eventually said it's not fixable, and resigned. And in her resignation letter, she talked about the problem being politicisation of the police. So it's in black and white from a person at the very head of the Scottish Police Authority. This is a problem.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. No, it's people in Scotland can't press charges, can they? They have to rely upon. It's the police who make the decision. That's my understanding.
Well, it's the Crown Office. Yeah, this is very centralised. So in England, you can bring a private criminal prosecution. In Scotland, you can't unless you get specific permission. Specific permission has not been granted ever in the last 120 years.
Right.
Okay, so you're not getting permission. You can ask, but the answer is no. Now, all prosecution in Scotland is by the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service. So the police report to them. They decide who gets prosecuted. Now, this puts a huge amount of power in the hands of the Lord Advocate, who is, of course, a member of the Cabinet, Humza Yousaf's Cabinet. So there's not a great deal of separation of powers there. And there's also an legal advisor to the Scottish Government. So there's not a lot of separation of powers there either. So to give you a couple of examples of how total that is, all decisions on having fatal accident inquiries in Scotland are carried out by the Crown Office headed by the Lord Advocate. So if somebody ends up dead under suspicious circumstances, this same organisation decides whether there'll be an investigation or not. That's not good. To give you another example of how total the control is, there was a case where there was a tax case, and the HMRC in London sent up one of their hotshot lawyers to prosecute the tax case, and he came into the Scottish court and he said to the judge in his plummy English voice, he said, I'm from Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, and I'll be prosecuting this case. And the judge says, no, you won't. He says, excuse me, I will. I'm from HMRC. And the judge says, no, you're not. You're from Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs in Scotland. You have no prosecutorial powers. You are a witness in this case. It's only the Crown Office that can prosecute everything. TV licence, the lot. Now, this concentrates all the power in the hands of the Lord Advocate. A very key post, and if the Lord Advocate is, shall we say, open to persuasion or bent or compromised or involved in some sort of abuse or covering up abuse or anything like that, then anyone who crosses the police, any part of the justice system in Scotland, is in serious trouble, because there's only one place to go, and that's the Crown Office. And the Crown Office is totally opaque. To give you another example, roughly 40% of the cases where the police do an investigation, they're satisfied there's a crime and they've got enough evidence to proceed. They put it to the Crown Office, whose lawyers assess whether the evidence is strong enough. And they said, yes, there's enough here to proceed. There's a crime being committed, and there's enough to get a reasonable chance of a conviction. 40% of those don't go ahead. So if it's a case of friends being protected, you just lose the odd case in the 40% that don't go ahead, and everything's okay, and people don't get prosecuted. This is the core of the Magic Circle scandal in the Edinburgh legal circle. This is a lot of things, because we're a small country, and it's based on having a few people who are meant to be fine, upstanding Christian gentlemen who don't do anything wrong, and they're put in key positions. And we don't have checks and balances. And if those key positions are occupied by people who are corrupt or open to undue influence or simply weak and doing whatever is easy, then everybody in the entire country suffers very profoundly, because if your criminal justice system is corrupt, then essentially your whole country has a big rotten sore at the heart of it.
Yes, very good point, and well explained. Thank you for taking that time to explain that, because I had been wondering about that just prior to coming on the show, just what who decides, as it were. David, we're at the top of the hour. I just want to remind people that you are can be found, your UK column can be found at twitter.com/UK column, and UK column itself is at ukcolumn.org, and your Twitter is at twitter.com/Albion_Rover. Thank you very much, David, for all your thoughts tonight, and for coming in and enlightening us with your point of view. We will have you back on again shortly, no doubt, because you're one of our favourite guests. So unless you've any parting words.
Well, just a thank you for having me on. It's always a real pleasure to come on and talk with you. I was hoping we might get on to some of the things that you've experienced by way of pressure and the people attempting to silence you. Maybe we can talk about that next time, or maybe I'll have you on UK column and we can talk about it there. But for tonight,
Perhaps.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you, David, and have a lovely evening. Speak again. Bye now.
Thank you.
Good for David Scott, a great guest who is always very welcome at A Force for Good, and always got a lot to say. Christopher says, thank you, David. And Catherine says, thanks, David. Great chat. We're on Substack, which is ukaforceforgood.substack.com. And we are putting out an original article per week on Substack. And that's behind a paywall. But that paywall is open to all our monthly donors. So if you are already a union supporter, then you can get free access behind our Substack paywall by simply contacting us. And what we suggest is, if you want free access to our Substack articles, then become a union supporter. That's going to work out the best for you, because for £5 a month, £1.15 a week, you can become a union supporter, and we will give you free access behind our Substack paywall, which is worth £3.50 a month to you, or £35 a year. So, good deal all round. Is just another reward that we give to our monthly donors, another way of encouraging people to become monthly donors. And if you do become a monthly donor, you also get access to our badges, free books, free flags, things like that. It's a good deal, and our monthly donors are what keep us going and what enable us to keep doing these videos and our activism at the weekends and our physical productions. We were not here last week because we were writing up our next issue of Union Heart, which I'm pleased to say is well on the way to completion. We've done 3/4 of it, and we'll be finishing off the final quarter in the coming week, going to print probably around the 10th of September, 10th or 11th of September, to be in the office by the end of that week. So everything is going well also with that. So we're doing hard copy literature publication, we're doing video publication, we're doing audio podcast publication, and we are publishing every day on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and weekly on Substack. So we're really spreading ourselves around. We're really doing extremely well for an organisation which runs on a very, very small amount of money, folks. Imagine what we could do if we got significant investment. Maybe someday we will, but even if we don't, we're going to continue to be here standing up for the United Kingdom and keeping the British end up. Folks, it's been great to have you with us. We'll be back next week. We will have a guest also next week. And so it just remains for me to say, as always, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next time.